Hi, everyone. Welcome. Please help yourself to coffee. We're going to start at 9:20, so you have a few more minutes to mingle, get coffee as it's being made, and we'll start the program at 9:20. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started now. Please take your seats and welcome. My name is Margaret Ziegler. I am the ICA representative in the United States. ICA stands for the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. We're so glad you're here with us today. ICA is a member institution of 34 member states with ministries of agriculture from the Western Hemisphere. And each year at COP, we hold a pavilion like this, the home of sustainable agriculture of the Americas. And we try to bring the voices, not just of the Americas, but a global conversation, South-South dialogue as well, to the subject of agriculture, food systems, food security, and climate change. We're really excited today to welcome Food Tank and Danielle and other guests. This is a series we're going to do each day, broadcasting from COP. And we're so pleased that Danielle is here with Food Tank. And this event is made possible also by Food Tank, Pegasus Capital, Producers Trust, and Forum for Food Security and Farmers. If I said that wrong, please, you can correct me, Danielle. Sorry.
I gotcha.
We've been here a number of days and lots going on, but we're so glad you're here with us. Welcome to the pavilion. And I'll turn it over now to Danielle and her guest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Let's give her a round of applause, please. She's had a long week. Hi, everyone. My name's Danny Nierenberg. I'm president and co-founder with Bernard Pollock, who's in the back of the room, of Food Tank. We're a research and advocacy organization really devoted to highlighting stories of hope and success in food and agriculture systems across the globe. I am so pleased to be here. I want to thank Margaret and ICA, the Sustainable Agriculture of the Americas Pavilion. What a great space. The Forum for Farmers and Food Security, Pegasus Capital, and Producers Trust for making this possible. I'm really excited for our conversation, but before I start with Eric, who I'll introduce in a minute, I want to reflect on some of the things that I've heard happening over the last few days. And yesterday was thankfully a rest day for all of you, but I'm sure a lot was going on behind the scenes. We learned from some of our friends at different nonprofits that an updated draft of the global stocktake outcomes was published, and all mentions, unfortunately, of food and agriculture have been removed. This is really no doubt concerning, but we have a few days of negotiations left, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for food and agriculture to be put back in. The Food and Land Use Coalition, EDF, and WWF have published an open letter urging that food systems and their valuable role in mitigation and adaptation to the climate crisis be included in the decision text. So you can find out more information by looking at their website, so fingers crossed again. In other bad news, negotiators on the joint work on agriculture and food security have stopped all negotiating and won't resume until June. But again, I think there's opportunity there for a lot of what's been happening here at COP to be included. I am encouraged by so many things that are happening here, including the discussions that have been taking place here in this pavilion over the last few days and elsewhere. I just talked to a great youth advocate in the audience, Nika, who is doing incredible work on food systems. And earlier this week, Jean-Sebastien Paez from the Young Professionals for Agricultural Development, or YPARD, called on governments to include young people as permanent decision makers in all negotiations and decisions made around the climate crisis. So I think that's really, really positive. And I also want to all of us to remember that food and agriculture are finally on the table at COP in a big way. And so this is really thanks to the efforts of many people in this room and elsewhere who've been making such valuable contributions since Glasgow and even before to really get food and agriculture a bigger space. So that's what I think is happening now. We'll look forward to hearing more about what is happening with the negotiations later today. I am really excited to be with my guest today, Eric Mittenhall, who is the Chief Strategy Officer for the North American Meat Institute. I'm going to give him a round of applause for being here and having a conversation with me. The last time I saw you, Eric, I was at your PACT conference, and I'm wondering if you can talk about the PACT work that the North American Meat Institute does.
Yeah, so the North American Meat Institute, our members are meat companies who produce 95% of the red meat, beef, pork, lamb, and veal in the U.S., and the majority of the poultry as well. And our strategy is sustainability, which we call Protein Pact. Protein Pact is both a sustainability framework that's aimed to take a consistent approach for sustainability, which for us is animal welfare, environmental impact, food safety, human health and wellness, and labor and human rights. And we feel like all of those are really critical to be a part of the sustainability puzzle for our industry. And so we have metrics within that for how we can support and drive continuous improvement within our industry in a consistent way, aligned with global goals and global standards. That includes more than 90 metrics that we evaluate on an annual basis, and we have been working with our members to share data, to have the proof points of where our industry is and where we are going between now and 2030. This is a major culture change for our industry. We have no history of actually sharing data at an organizational level until last year, when we were able to do that with our membership for the very first time. And we went from having zero, have never done it before, to having 90% of the industry by volume reporting data through our framework in year one. In year two, we grew that, and so again, have a really substantial portion of the industry and growing, participating with us and working towards common goals that we have. Our big environmental goal, which obviously is most relevant here, is that we work with our members to set science-based targets. To date, we have a couple of dozen members who have set targets, and we want to be aligned with the Paris Climate Agreement and ensure that our industry is taking the appropriate steps to improve our environmental impacts and do so in ways that are really advanced and aligned with global goals. In addition to that, the Protein Pact is also a collaborative effort throughout the whole animal agriculture supply chain, because there is really substantial work occurring throughout all of animal agriculture when it comes to sustainability. But the way it's largely evolved is that each individual species sector has determined their own priorities and goals, which makes sense because they're representing the producers that are working in those sectors. And we felt as an organization that represents all of those in one way or another, that we could play a really valuable role as an umbrella that ties together that work in a coordinated way. And so we are working together with beef and pork and poultry and dairy and feed and the inputs into feed and corn and soy, as well as animal health companies, to all try to align our work and measurements, trying to tie data systems together, and ultimately demonstrate the progress throughout the entire supply chain in a very consistent way. And our partnerships are really strong. We've made a lot of progress in a few years in doing that together. And so that's what we're working towards between now and 2030.
Thank you so much, Eric. I want to come back to the environmental sort of work that you've been doing, but you mentioned these data proof points, and that's been a real culture change for the industry and for the Meat Institute. I'm wondering if you can talk about what that means internally, because I think to have that external change, you've had to have a lot of internal change.
Yeah, I mean, we began this journey back in the fall of 2018 to think about how, as an organization, we can be more proactive. I mean, that was the genesis of this. Consumers have different expectations of our industry than they did previously. Our job as an association is to be proactive and think about how we can work in a positive direction. And our leadership has been really bought in from the very beginning. And we worked to identify what are the core topics that we need to focus on for continuous improvement, and the ones I mentioned. And then worked with our members to determine, what are the measures that are most appropriate. We really have some top-notch sustainability experts within our membership that we lean very heavily on to identify, what are the things that our industry needs to do to be aligned with global goals. All of our metrics are largely aligned with GRI, but we've looked to the other standards bodies that are out there, done multiple analyses to identify, are we aligned with CDP and others, and the answer is yes, we are very closely aligned. And so that has been a key element of it. And once we went through that process with our members, doing it also with outside feedback was really critical as well. We didn't want to do it in a way that was just the industry talking to itself. So we engaged a wide range of outside stakeholders to review our metrics, get feedback. We had a public comment period that really offered the opportunity to share people's opinions on the direction we were going. And I think 90% of the comments we received on our framework were positive. And so we felt like that was a really great start. Getting over the hill of getting members to begin the data collection effort was the next step, and making sure we had really strong data security was really critical in that, and making sure that we were providing value back to our industry in the data that they were providing. And so we make sure that our members get data back in return that allow them to evaluate their own operations in comparison to the rest of the industry, and they can then prioritize their efforts within their companies to determine, they see where they're strong, they see where they have opportunity for further improvement, and as an association, we bring resources to the table to help them where they need it and drive their improvement based off of what we see. And so we see the opportunities for education, for resources, and that's what we're doing now is putting that together.
Thanks for all of that. One of the things that I think is interesting, and my WhatsApp was just blowing up about this last week, was a D-Smog article talked about how the Meat Institute and the dairy folks were here at COP in a big way to sort of, they used different words than I might use, but to greenwash how meat contributes to climate change, to greenwash how meat contributes to sustainable nutrition, is I think the term that they used. I'm wondering what your response is to that.
Yeah, the FAO put out a report earlier this year that said animal protein is uniquely nutrient dense, that cannot be replaced by other foods in a way that helps, helps people's livelihoods and helps with nutrition. So we feel like our industry has a critical, necessary role to play in this discussion. The nutrition that our products provide, and again, why we don't just focus on one area, it is really holistic, is critical for healthy development, healthy cognitive development. We see research that shows that there are substantial nutrient deficiencies around the world, including in the United States, where people are not getting the necessary iron and other vitamins and minerals in their diets that they need. And meat is uniquely nutrient dense to be able to provide those. And so we want to be here as part of the discussions, show how animal protein can be a part of that solution, and also show the steps that our industry is taking, the commitments that we're making to improve our impacts and make sure that we're a responsible part of that solution.
One of the things that I'm interested in is that it's been such a long road to get methane on the table at COP and in these global discussions. And, I think last week with the announcement by the COP28 presidency of a new initiative to reduce methane and other non-CO2 greenhouse gas emissions, there's a lot of movement now. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how you're working with your members to do that.
Yes, there's a ton of work occurring on methane, and we're going to have a panel discussion later this afternoon at 1:30, where we'll have some expertise on there to talk more specifically about the research and the opportunities around methane. But we are engaged in a number of projects, and we've seen USDA just this week announce tens of millions of dollars towards university research to reduce methane. And I've been asked several times related to methane, what is the silver bullet solution? There's not a silver bullet solution. It is an all of the above solution, and it involves feed additives, and it involves genetics and vaccines and grazing practices that can be implemented to reduce methane. And there is great opportunity to make improvements there, and research has shown that we can reduce methane to a level that allows our industry to be climate neutral. And so we want to be very active in that space and making sure that research moves forward and support it as best as we can.
And you really envision a way for the meat sector to be carbon neutral?
Yeah, I mean, the research is there that it can be done, but it's going to take the implementation of those practices, making sure it's worthwhile for farmers to adopt those practices. And so that's where we as an industry have to work together to make sure that happens.
What are some of the ways that you can de-risk that for producers, for farmers and ranchers?
Well, I think that's an area where there's a lot of work being put in, and again, our panel this afternoon is going to talk a lot about that. We have a rancher on our panel who is really engaged in her own operation in grazing management practices and enhancing biodiversity, and there are ways to support getting resources to farmers to make sure it is a lower risk. I think the Climate Smart Commodities grants that USDA has done is really a very positive step in that direction. We're engaged with some work with the Nature Conservancy to really kind of build out the marketplace and identify what the appropriate market levers are when it comes to methane and helping farmers. And so I think that all of that work is ongoing and something we're still working through, but it is something that we can make progress on and really show substantial improvement.
Eric, when you started out in this field, did you imagine having these partnerships with like the Nature Conservancy, with other environmental groups? Because I think the meat sector has evolved very significantly over the last several years.
Yeah, I think our industry has come a long way in that regard, and so we recognize that those partnerships are critical. The solution for improving everyone's impact on the climate is not a one organization, one industry solution. It takes everybody, and I think that's why you see 80,000 people here at COP, where everybody wants to highlight the contributions that they can make and the opportunities that we have throughout a variety of industries to ensure we're making progress. And so, throughout our industry, that's why we have partnerships. That's why we want to work with expertise in environmental NGOs what they bring to the table, and make sure we're leveraging that in a positive way throughout our industry.
What kind of partnerships do you see developing in the future to further that kind of progress?
I think it's a lot of advancing what's out there. We're in the process of formalizing some of that, where we've had ongoing conversations, been involved in projects. We are actually creating what we're calling the Protein Pact Advisors, and the goal is to really define the depth of the relationships that we want to have and what the opportunities are to plug in. We've been talking to World Wildlife Fund about a variety of projects that they're involved in, and so we want to make sure that we are engaging with them in a very productive way towards tangible outcomes, as opposed to just having a superficial relationship.
Sure.
And so we're kind of working on all of those details right now, and that's not just in the environmental space. Working with groups like the National Safety Council related to worker safety, American Humane related to animal welfare. There are just a wide range of groups that we can partner with, but again, we want to have deep relationships that bring that progress forward.
As an industry-based group, I wonder, for you as an individual, how often do you get to talk to farmers and ranchers themselves and sort of like bounce some of these ideas and questions off of them?
Fairly frequently, and I go through our producer partners largely. They're the ones with the expertise. Sitting here with the National Pork Board from the U.S. in the room, we work really closely with the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, which is here as well. They work directly with producers on an everyday basis, and they are the groups that specifically represent producers and provide the resources on the ground for those producers. And so we want to be really strongly connected with them and make sure that we understand their perspectives and unique needs. And so we rely heavily on those partnerships to make sure that we're doing things together.
Yeah, that collaboration is really key, and the unusual collaborations. And you mentioned researchers. I know you work with Frank Mittenhall, right?
Frank Mittler, he's actually here in the audience.
Nice to see you. Why is that sort of I know why the science-based evidence is important, but how do you, so, there's so many myths and things going on that people don't quite understand. How do you counteract that when you're working with researchers?
Well, we have to show the science behind what we're doing. And as an industry, I mean, largely that science is not occurring in a vacuum. That science requires resources. And so we are proud to be supporting science for all of these various issues, whether it's environment, nutrition, or other, to make sure that there is really strong scientific evidence behind everything we do. And so it is necessary for us to engage with researchers to help determine where the gaps are. We don't want to duplicate efforts. Where are the gaps? What are the needs? What are the resources needed to fill those gaps? And then help to do that. We actually have a foundation that has historically been entirely food safety and nutrition focused. In the last year, we've expanded it to include environment, worker safety, and animal welfare as well, to be consistent with our protein-packed work, but allow us to have the mechanism to fund projects on the ground related to environmental impact and animal welfare. And so that's something that we're working towards now. We have an academic advisory group with what we do, again, to have that discussion about where are the research gaps, what resources are needed, how do we fill those, and we will not accomplish our goal without filling those research gaps. So as an industry, we have a responsibility to help provide the resources to advance those, and we're proud to be able to do that.
What are the biggest research gaps that you see right now?
Well, there's a lot of research, I think, around methane that is ongoing and continuing, and I think our conversation later today with Dr. Mitlerner and others, we'll talk a little bit more about some of those things. I think there are in all of the different areas, there's a lot of additional research needs related to specific impacts and how they can be measured, and then how those measurements can be applied in the reporting context. And so we are hearing a lot about those and want to make sure that we're kind of focusing on the right ones that are going to actually make a difference.
Thank you. I'm wondering, one thing that bothers me, I grew up in a little town called Defiance, Missouri, where it was mostly crop and livestock farmers, soy and corn and then cattle. And, I've been accused of this in the past, blaming farmers and ranchers for destroying the environment. How do we get away from that blame scenario, whether we're blaming the meat industry, we're blaming farmers, we're blaming the vegans? How do we get away from that?
Well, I think conversations like this are a great first step. I mean, I think we all have a lot of common ground. I think last year was my very first COP, and my biggest takeaway listening to all the discussions, even from folks that may not fully agree with our industry and our perspective, was that there is a lot of common ground there. That agriculture plays an important role, that we can be a solution, that there's opportunity for improvement in a positive direction. And how we get there, we might differ on, but that common ground is really important to recognize and agree upon and work together on. And so I think that is the key. It's finding the common ground, it's finding the collaboration opportunities, it's recognizing that production of all types is necessary. We talked about the role of animal protein and its nutrient density. Food security is critically important around the world, and we have to make sure that we are producing enough food in a sustainable way that supports food security. And so there are a lot of ways to do that, and making sure that we are amplifying best practices that support food security is really critical.
And also keeping in mind animal welfare and worker welfare. There's been a lot of things in the news around labor and child labor at processing plants in the United States. How do you counteract those bad practices that are, sometimes happening?
Yeah, I mean, as an association, we've put a lot of resources towards labor recently. We had a meeting with the Department of Labor last year where they asked us about child labor, and to be honest, I was surprised. I did not think that was something that occurred within our industry. As an industry, we should not be employing children in our facilities, and it's something that we take very seriously. Our members have put in a lot of energy towards better practices around identifying the workers that are coming into facilities. In the U.S., we have a system called E-Verify, which is kind of the identification management system that the government has put together. And so we've largely relied on that over the years, but the reality is it's not a fully effective system. And that's one of the things we've realized as we've experienced the child labor challenges, which I think occur not just uniquely in our industry. It is throughout broadly in agriculture and other industries as well. And so we've had several meetings with experts to highlight best practices as it relates to identification and ensuring that the right folks are working in our facilities. And we have a lot of ongoing work in that space. And so it has absolutely become a major priority of ours and something we're working to ensure that our industry is doing the right thing as far as identifications and making sure workers are safe. Our goal is that we reduce worker injury rates by an additional 50% from a 2019 baseline on top of the 75% reduction in worker injury rates we had over the previous 20 years. So worker safety was the very first non-competitive issue within our industry. All of our protein-packed issues are considered non-competitive, where we are sharing best practices throughout the industry. But worker safety was the very first, and the progress that we've made in that space is immense. We always have room for continuous improvement there, and so we're working to make our facilities even safer. But the safety practices, and we have resources, videos that show the safety practices that are in place, are substantial, and worker safety is really the number one thing that we focus on, because without the workers, we can't produce the food.
Sure. Shifting gears a little bit and going back to what you mentioned about you being an umbrella group and also working with, the feed producers. Can you talk a little bit more about that with the corn and soybean producers and how to help them reduce their emissions in different ways?
Yeah, we actually have the American Feed Industry Association in the room here too, really critical partners of ours, and they have developed a feed sustainability roadmap that outlines best practices for feed sustainability as well. And so again, it's leaning on the expertise that exists within the individual sectors and making sure that we're connecting it to what we're doing, and making sure that when our members are procuring animals that they're coming from farms where best practices are in place. Within our metrics, we have metrics around standards for environmental practices on farm, animal welfare practices on farm, worker practices on farm, to ensure that best practices are being utilized throughout the supply chain. But I won't sit here and tell the American Feed Industry Association how to best do their job. They are the experts, and we leverage their expertise to advance what we're doing.
I'd love to talk to you later. Thank you for all that. Eric, this is your second COP, right? So what do you hope from this COP? Is there sort of our final sum up question?
Yeah, I think the collaboration opportunity and the common ground is really what we want to get from coming here, and understanding the direction and priorities of all of the groups discussing food systems issues, and thinking about how our industry can evolve and continuously improve in a way that's consistent with the discussions here and the science, and making sure that we're building more relationships. I mean, I think going back to the unusual relationships, we're having a lot of conversations here with folks who we would not maybe normally meet in other areas, and we want to have those discussions and find the common ground and understand ways that we can work together, because I think with the vast majority of folks here, there are opportunities to work together towards those common goals, and we want to advance that.
And that common ground needs to be achieved quickly, because the urgency of these issues is greater than ever before. Thank you, Eric. It was really nice to talk to you. Let's give him a round of applause. I'm sorry. Oh, great. I want to make sure there's time for Q&A. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going to ask a question for Mark Zorns in the audience, because he's very interested in food waste. I'm interested in hearing about how PACT thinks about reducing the food waste from the animal industry, because it is important. You're taking living beings. You want to use as much of them as possible.
Yeah, food waste is one of the metrics that we measure, and I think as an industry, we excel related to food waste. Our industry does not waste anything from the animal. We use it for, you use it for hides with leather, you use it for medical products, you use it for cosmetics. Interestingly, I was in a facility a couple of years ago that separated out some of the products that were going into use in heart valves, artificial heart valves. And it was right after when Mick Jagger had a heart issue. The heart valve that Mick Jagger received came from an animal, not necessarily from this facility, but it came from an animal. And so, you know, we want to make sure it's the sustainable thing to do, to use everything from the animal we possibly can. And so our industry really excels at that. You know, again, there's always opportunities to improve that, and that's where we want to measure and ensure that we're taking steps, particularly within our facilities, to reduce waste as much as possible. But I think, and beyond that, I think, again, getting back to the feed conversation, when it comes even to crop agriculture, we're able to take parts of plants that humans can't eat, and there's actually really good research that shows that for every kilogram of plant-based food that is human consumable, there are 4 kilograms of plant-based food that are not consumable by humans. And so we can't put that in a landfill. We feed that to animals to ensure that we're making the most of those plants as well. And so again, our role in reducing waste starts from that, goes all the way through using the entire animal, and animals do not just provide food, animals provide many other products that we're able to use.
Thanks for explaining that. Any comments, questions?
Eric, can you talk a little bit more about the role of animal health in reducing food waste?
Yeah, no, animal health is critically important as well. And I think just from a sustainability story, raising healthy animals ensures we are more sustainable as an industry. If you have unhealthy animals that are not entering the food system, that are not, are not providing products, we are not being sustainable as an industry because, again, those products go to waste. And so making sure that our animals are as healthy as possible is a key piece of the sustainability work that we do. And it allows us to, be most responsible for the environment as well by raising those healthy animals.
Related to that, thoughts about antibiotic misuse and overuse?
Yeah, I mean, our industry has done a lot in recent years related to antibiotics, and the FDA in the U.S. has developed rules around antibiotic use, and so we need to ensure that our animals are healthy. Again, it goes back to that, and so using antibiotics as a method to maintain animal health is important. But we don't necessarily need to be using the antibiotics for growth promotion purposes. That's what has been outlawed. And so, it is up to veterinarians, and our industry works really closely with veterinarians to ensure that antibiotics are being prescribed, and antibiotics are being prescribed in appropriate ways that supports animal health, again, to be more sustainable.
Thanks, Eric. I don't think there are any other comments or questions unless I see someone in the back. But I want to thank Margaret and the Eco Pavilion for hosting us and for this wonderful discussion. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Just very quickly, just on this topic, we have seen here in our pavilion, compared with last year, an increasing demand for events and knowledge and information sharing about livestock and animal production. So this year we have a lot of events, perhaps almost half of the events that were requested in our pavilion are about livestock. So I think it's an indication that the urgency of the matter is increasing, but we have to answer those questions and bring real solutions. So I just wanted to make that comment. Also, magically, now we have food in the back of the room. So, please help yourself to food, coffee. Again, thank you so much to Food Tank. Thank you.